All right, let's dive right into an explainer on something that literally shapes the world around us. We're looking at the market forces of supply and demand. Now, I know it's incredibly easy to think of these concepts as just dry, boring graphs in an economics textbook, but I want you to completely toss that idea out the window. Supply and demand are actually the behavioral forces that build our entire reality. They're the driving impulses of human beings, you and me, interacting, trading, and making decisions every single day. To break down this dance of the market, we're hitting 5 quick beats today. First, the rules of the market. Second, the buyer's perspective. Third, the seller's perspective. Fourth, finding the equilibrium. And finally, when the market shifts. We really have to understand the isolated rules for buyers and sellers completely separately before we smash them together. Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the rules of the market. Before we can look at the dancers, we kind of need to understand the dance floor itself, right? The actual arena where these economic actors meet. For this explainer, we're focusing on what economists call a perfectly competitive market. Basically, this just means a market where the goods being sold are identical, and there are so many buyers and sellers that no single person has any real pull over the price. You just have to accept the going rate. You're what we call a price taker. We're holding all the messy, complex factors of the real world constant just for a bit so we can clearly see the core mechanics at play here. Moving on to Section 2, the buyer's perspective. Let's flip the lens and look at the demand side of the equation, seeing the market strictly through the eyes of our first group of dancers, the buyers. So buyer behavior is driven by this golden rule, the law of demand. Think of it as a super simple rhythmic if-then framework. Assuming all other things are equal, if the price of a good goes up, well, then the quantity demanded falls. And if the price drops, quantity demanded rises. It's just human nature, isn't it? When things get more expensive, we naturally buy a lot less of them. Now, to figure out the total market demand at any given price, we literally just add up all the individual choices. Say at a price of $4, Catherine wants 4 ice cream cones and Nicholas wants 3. That gives us a total market demand of 7. The whole market curve is really just the sum of all those individual human impulses smashed together. Okay, pay attention to this part because the difference between a movement along a demand curve and a total shift of the curve trips up so many people. A movement along the curve is caused by one thing and one thing only, a change in the price of the good itself. Like if a new tax suddenly hikes up the price of cigarettes, buyers just slide right up that exact same demand curve and buy fewer packs. But, and here's the kicker, if the government slaps graphic warning labels on those packages, that actually changes the buyer's tastes. They want fewer cigarettes regardless of what they cost. That causes the entire demand curve to fundamentally shift to the left. All right, Section 3, the seller's perspective. We know buyers love low prices, but let's switch gears to the supply side and meet the other half of our market equation. Enter the sellers. Now, their motivation is the exact opposite of the buyers. The law of supply gives us the seller's if-then rule. Other things being equal, when the price of a good rises, the quantity supplied also rises. It makes total sense. Higher prices mean higher potential profits. So suddenly, sellers are very, very willing to produce and sell a whole lot more. And just like we saw with the buyers, aggregate market supply is just the sum of all the individual sellers. If Ben is willing to supply 3 cones at $4 and Jerry supplies 4, our total market quantity supplied is 7. Simple math. And exactly like demand, we have to contrast a movement along the supply curve with a total shift. If the price of ice cream goes from $3 to $4, sellers just move along their existing curve and crank out more. But say someone invents an amazing, fully automated ice cream machine. That's a huge leap in technology. Or what if the price of milk, a massive input cost, completely plummets? Those kinds of factors change how much sellers can produce at every single price point, which physically shifts the entire supply curve left to right. Section 4, finding the equilibrium. Now for the really fun part. We know what both groups want, so let's bring them together for the meetup phase, where the real magic of the market actually happens. That magic point? We call that equilibrium. It's the exact singular spot where the quantity buyers are willing and able to buy perfectly balances out the quantity sellers are willing and able to sell. Remember our ice cream scenario? At a price of exactly $4, buyers demanded 7 cones and sellers supplied exactly 7 cones. The market is in perfect harmony. Every single cone produced finds a happy buyer. But what if the price isn't $4? Like, what if sellers get a bit greedy and price those cones at $5? Well, they're going to make a ton of cones, but buyers are going to step back. Boom, you've got a surplus. Way too much supply, not enough demand. Sellers are basically forced to slash their prices just to get rid of the melting ice cream. On the flip side, if the price is a bargain at $3, buyers absolutely swarm the stand. But sellers, they don't want to make enough cones for that cheap. That creates a shortage. However, because you've got desperate buyers waving cash around, sellers quickly realize they can bump up the price. In a free market, these imbalances are totally temporary. Which actually brings us to this incredibly powerful quote that basically sums up the entire law of supply and demand. The price of any good adjusts to bring the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded of that good into balance. You see, markets are beautifully self-correcting. Prices act almost like gravity, right? Always pulling the market back toward that perfect equilibrium point. All right, final stretch. Section 5. When the market shifts. We've learned the steps, we've found the harmony. But honestly, real-world events never stand still. Let's change the music and trace the actual cause and effect on our equilibrium. Whenever a major event hits the news, economists break out their ultimate detective tool, a 3-step method to analyze the market mystery. Step 1. Decide if the event shifts the supply curve, the demand curve, or maybe both. Step 2. Figure out which direction the curve shifts. Left means a decrease, right means an increase. And step 3. Use a diagram to see exactly how the equilibrium price and quantity change because of it. Let's actually put this into practice with a scenario. The event. An abnormally hot summer strikes the city. Step 1. Who does this affect, buyers or sellers of ice cream? Well, it affects buyers' tastes, so it's the demand curve that shifts. Step 2. Which direction? Well, people obviously crave more ice cream when it's boiling outside, so demand increases, shifting to the right. Step 3. The result. With a huge spike in demand, the new equilibrium point means the final price of ice cream shoots up and the total quantity sold rises right along with it. Okay, let's try another one. Event. A global shortage causes the price of sugar to absolutely skyrocket. Step 1. Sugar is a key ingredient and input for making ice cream. So this time, it hits the sellers. The supply curve shifts. Step 2. Because it's suddenly way more expensive to produce that ice cream, sellers are going to make less of it. So the supply curve shifts to the left. Step 3, the result? Our new equilibrium shows that the final price of ice cream will rise for the consumer, but the overall quantity sold in the market actually falls. Now things get a little spicy when both curves move at the exact same time. Imagine the price of apple juice falls dramatically, and, simultaneously, there's just an incredibly abundant orange crop. Well, apple juice is a substitute for orange juice, right? Since the substitute is suddenly cheaper, demand for oranges shifts left. People want the cheaper apple juice. But at the exact same time, that abundant crop means the supply of oranges shifts right. When you combine a drop in demand with a huge surge in supply, the price is absolutely guaranteed to plummet. But the total quantity sold? Well, that depends entirely on which shift was actually bigger. So the final quantity is what we call ambiguous. Let's zoom out for a second and bring this explainer home. Why does all of this actually matter? What's the big takeaway here? It's that prices aren't just random, arbitrary numbers slapped on a tag at the grocery store. Prices are vital, dynamic signals. They act as the communication network for our entire society, guiding human decisions and carefully balancing the allocation of the world's incredibly scarce resources. Ultimately, that equilibrium price decides exactly who gets to consume a product and who is willing to step up and produce it. Which leads me to leave you with a final, slightly provocative puzzle to test your new economic intuition. Imagine the news reports that a massive typhoon has completely wiped out this year's apple crop. Your roommate just shrugs and says, "Whatever, I don't care, I only drink pineapple smoothies." Are they right to rush it off? Think back to what we just talked about regarding substitutes. If apples are wiped out, what happens to the demand for other fruits? Will your roommate actually be safe from the fallout? Or is their daily pineapple smoothie about to get way, way more expensive? Think about it, and you'll start to see just how deeply interconnected the forces of supply and demand truly are. Thanks so much for learning with me today.